Okay people, I've got an epic build today. Have you ever wanted to be able to go full foot on the gas and kill every minor enemy quickly, whilst also being able to kill tankier enemies with a singular attack? Well, look no further than the Necrotic Thunderblade build. Now this build works in low tier to even potentially Grandmaster Nightfalls. You'll be giving your team great support as well as dishing out some pretty serious damage yourself, with damage from your guns, poison, and jolt damage. You'll be able to keep champs from regenerating health and be able to clear rooms of enemies in a singular attack. Now for this build you're going to be running art. I'm running the Chaos Reach Super because in my opinion it's better than the normal Stormcaller. I'm then running a Healing Rift, Burst Glide, Chain Lightning. You can change this for Ball Lightning. It does work a little bit better though with Chain Lightning. And then a Storm Grenade. The aspects that I'm running are Lightning Surge for that additional melee attack where you're sliding, which is going to be a key component of this build. And I'm also running Electrostatic Mind, which defeating jolted targets creates Ionic Traces. The fragments that I'm running are Spark of Ions, defeating a jolted target creates an Ionic Trace. I'm then running Spark of Resistance. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage, which is great considering we'll be using the sliding melee. And then I'm running Spark of Shock, your arc grenade jolt targets, which then means we're going to be making even more Ionic Traces. And then Spark of Magnitude, your lingering arc grenades, such as lightning grenades, pulse grenades, and storm grenades, have extended duration. Running this because then it gives our grenades a little more damage, which is also a key component of our build. Now moving on to the build's mods. For this build you're going to be running 2 hands-on mods and a Well of Striking. Well of Striking, when you pick up a well, it's going to give you melee energy back. Next is the bread and butter of the build. You're going to be wanting to run Necrotic Grips with the perk Grasp of the Devourer, damaging combatants, poisons them, so increasing damage over time. You also want to be running an Elemental Well mod, which will make us charge with light. Next you need the Heavy-Handed mod, in which we'll be taking full advantage of a charge of light. It will be giving us half of our melee back every time we pick up an Elemental Well. Then you're going to want Solar Boot and running a Melee Well Maker mod. That means every time you get a kill with your melee, you'll then spawn an Elemental Well, which will then make us charge of light. And then for the class item, you're going to be running 2 Outreach mods. This will give around 40% of your melee back, as well as an Elemental Ordnance mod, which will spawn wells on grenade kills. Now, the build is pretty simple to use. It's just slide, melee, throw a grenade, and you get your melee back almost instantly. Because after the slide melee, either everything is killed by the lightning or is dying to the poison, which is going to constantly proc and kill other enemies when the poison enemy dies. Now to top this off, you can switch to your Glaive, which after the update to Glaive, allowing them to proc with certain exotic gauntlets, every time you whack the enemy with the Glaive, it's going to proc the Grasp of the Devourer perk that's on the Necrotic Grips. This means even more poison damage, which will kill almost all the remaining enemies that you're fighting, whilst the already poisoned enemies are dying and killing other enemies due to the poison damage proccing the jolt damage. Now, you're probably thinking, but how viable is this build in higher level gameplays like Grandmaster Nightfalls? Well, I've taken this build into high level lost sectors where it's very comfortably able to kill all the champs with no issues. In fact, I think this build is great at making sure overload champs specifically don't regen their health, and helps lock them down for your team to kill. This build is also good for inflicting more damage to bosses, as when you jolt the boss with the melee attack, the Mark of Devourer perk will proc jolt damage, meaning more damage to the boss along with your heavy guns, and the chain lightning from jolt will kill all enemies near the boss. So how does this build work? Right, so firstly you want to be throwing your grenade. The grenade will then spawn an Elemental Well that you're going to pick up. And then when you run up to the boss, you want to use your sliding melee, which will then proc the poison damage and the jolt damage. As you can see, every shot of my Cataclysmic Fusion Rifle was proccing the jolt damage, as well as causing more poison damage. And after you've killed the boss, you can then use your Glaive to clearing up any other enemies that may still be alive. Now this build has a lot of potential. It's good for locking down rooms of enemies, keeping champs locked down for you and your team to be able to kill them. You can even use the Warlock specific Glaive instead of the normal Glaive and use a source of constant healing. I've used this build in Master Nightfalls and I'm yet to use the build in Grandmaster. The build is great in raids and dungeons, so I'd recommend trying this build. If there's any improvements I could make to the build, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.